So when we plan for an impact, we've got a project and we want to make a change. The first impact plan step is to set your goal. And this is actually the hardest thing. What do we want to do? Now, the way you can work out what you want to do, it can be aided by the use of things called empathy maps, user personas, and sometimes user journeys. Now, if you haven't come across them yet, we will come across them very shortly. And they're very useful and easy tools to use and work out who the people are who are going to use our project and what they need from our project. Essentially, these tools will just give you a list of people, organizations, or groups who may be interested in using your project. Doesn't matter what your project is, there should be someone who wants to use it. And once you've identified the people who are going to use your project or application, you want to work out how your application is going to benefit these people. What are they going to get out of it? Why are they interested in using your project? And what needs do they have that have been met by this project? So once you've worked out who the people are, what they need and what they want, you can move on to identify ways that you can measure whether or not you have achieved the impact. So this has been done by answering questions like, what type of things would you expect to see in the interactions they have with your project? How do you know they're using it properly? And how can you be certain that you're having the intended impact? So you do that by measuring. You've got to come up with some way of measuring the impact. So this can be really simple. So for example, is it faster for the user to input data into your application than it is for them to write the data in an Excel file or into a book that records the information? Why is it better to use your application than for them to sit there and do the paperwork by hand? What benefit does your application give to them? What's measurable? Is it faster? Does it take less effort? Does it check the calculations, check the numbers as they're put in so they all add up and make sense, that there's no discrepancies, as opposed to them sitting there doing by hand? Well, what's the impact? How can we measure or know that we have succeeded? Now, the way we do this is we generate SMART goals. Now, you've probably heard of SMART goals before, things that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So our impact statements or our impact goals, they're actually just SMART goals. So we started with specific. Who's receiving the impact and what is the impact? So just say we're running the small business again. The person who's receiving the impact is the owner of the business. What impact are they achieving? They're achieving or receiving an impact that has a system that adds up all the numbers and saves them the time of entering the data in a book and using a calculator to check the figures. That's the impact. The benefit is that they are getting more accurate calculations and there's less likely to be an error in the reconciliation of the books. Okay, it's measurable. What changes will be able to be seen because of the impact? Okay, so the accuracy is going to increase, plus the speed of the calculations is going to increase. They're going to need to spend a lot less time doing the book work, so they can actually spend more time running the business, or even less time in the office. They're the measurable impacts. Is it achievable? Is it achievable for us to make a program that allows the user to put some numbers in and adds those numbers up quickly to give an answer? Okay, yes, it's achievable. So that's a bit of a check, a reality check for us in this project. Is it relevant? Why is this impact important? Well, it's important to the business owner because they want their figures to be accurate. So when they come to do things like paying tax or paying wages, they know that the data they have is correct, so they can do all those managerial jobs effectively and quickly and accurately. They can know if they're making profit or loss. They can have a much more up-to-date idea on how their business is performing. So that's why it's important. And for us, time-based is always going to be by the end of the project. Because our projects are quite small and only run for 4 to 7 weeks, we don't have any long-term goals. So once you've decided an impact, there's just one more question you probably should consider asking. Is there anything that could happen during the development of this project that could stop you and your users achieving your impact? What barriers could there be? Are there any accessibility issues? Do they need certain types of inputs? Does the system need to be very robust? Does it need to be able to handle rough working conditions? Are there anything that could happen that could prevent the goal being achieved? And then finally, we can use those impact goals as we're developing our project. We can use them to prioritize the different components of our project or the application as it develops. So we can know what impacts we're trying to achieve, and it can tell us what things to focus on first. So in the application example we're talking about, what's most important? It's most important that we have some way of putting the data into the system and some way of getting the calculations at the end of the day. That's most important. A very beautiful user interface, well, that's not quite as important at this point in time. That might be a secondary concern because in this instance we're more about speed and functionality than something pretty. So now it's time for you to do some work. You need to determine some impacts. So I'm going to give you a couple of sites to look at, and I want you to think about these particular sites and applications and determine the personal, social, and economic impacts that have been attempted. Now, they may not have personal, social, and economic impacts. They might not have all three, but they will have at least one of them, because every project must have an impact. Additionally, you could also come up with the types of users and their characteristics that may want to use these applications and who may derive benefit from the impact that has been achieved. So the first one I want you to look at is change.org. Change.org is a famous website where people start petitions to try and instigate change in different organizations. What impact are they trying to have? Is it personal, social, or economic? Well, change.org, I would say, is probably trying to have a social impact, primarily. It's trying to change the way things are done. It's trying to change people's opinions and the way that society works and operates. Yes, along the way, there may be some economic impacts that it achieves as a side effect for certain individuals. For example, down here, it says equal prize money for Paralympian winners. So that would be an impact economically for those winners of the competition. That is only a few people. What they're really trying to do is to change the society's opinion about the value of those performances. So this is really about social change. Okay, the second site one should have a look at is Austrade, the Australian Trade and Investment Commission. What are they trying to achieve? Is it a personal, social, or economic impact? Well, Austrade is primarily interested in making an economic impact. It's about generating trade and wealth for Australia. Now, is it trying to do this on an individual, organisation, business, or government level? Well, what it's really trying to do is put this on a business level. The Australian government is trying to assist businesses to trade internationally. That's its economic goal. So it's primarily and solely focused on economic benefits for Australian businesses. So today we've looked at impacts. We've looked at personal, social, and economic impacts. We've defined personal impacts. We've defined them as impacts at work for one individual. And we define social impacts as being for two or a group of individuals. And social impacts are basically anything that's not monetary. Anything that was monetary we defined as an economic impact. an impact that for an individual, a group, organization, or business. And then we took those ideas of impacts and we developed the idea of making an impact goal. And this was a SMART goal, something that was specific. We asked who was receiving the impact and what impact were they receiving. Then we asked how are we going to measure this, how are we going to know this impact is achieved. And then we asked, is this achievable for our project? And is it relevant? Why is the impact important? And finally, we considered the question, is it time-based? Which for us was always by the end of this project. So you need to be able to develop impacts for the projects that you are working on. And the reason you need to be able to develop them is so that you can use them to evaluate the success or otherwise of your project at the final conclusion of it.